My name is Tushar. I'm the founder of TeamOhana. TeamOhana is a headcount planning platform. We like to do these webinars, and I'll soon introduce Arthi to you guys. Is that as workforce planning, headcount planning is HR, and I would say a company's transformation project. And any part of transformation requires people, systems, and processes. Now, the people are already there, the HR team, the finance team, the talent team, the hiring managers. We bring in the system, but we need experts who have really, or I would like to say practitioners who have lived the problem to really build the process, because this process is some parts bespoke for every company. What works for a 300-person company may not work for a 3,000-person company. So I got introduced to Arthi because she was brought in as a consultant to help implement the process in one of the customers that we are working with. And my mind was blown. She had such good ideas that I think she has up-leveled in the last 3 months of working with her, our product. And as a giveaway or a takeaway at the end of this conversation, you're going to get the 5 new reports or recipes that are all Arthi's creation. So Arthi, why don't you introduce yourself, and thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is so fun and such a pleasure to be here. I have about 20 years of experience in FP&A, traditional FP&A, but I love headcount management. So I've been at both startups. I've been the first finance hire at a Series A startup, where I'm literally building the model on a Friday night for board meetings early morning Monday, to supporting 5 C-suite executives at DocuSign as a public company. I've seen headcount managed on a Post-it note, and then I've seen it managed with millions of dollars spent in different types of tools. I can tell you one thing, like the tool's not always an upgrade. There's always a spreadsheet behind. The spreadsheet just has more tabs at the bigger company.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think when we started talking about this idea of doing a webinar together, you actually told me that as part of your responsibilities in FP&A, headcount was not something that was directly thrown at you. You actually started doing it on the side because you were just so frustrated with the process. Tell us a little about this. Like what was that trigger point? How did you get in? What were the problems or the symptoms that you were seeing that got excited you to go ahead and solve them?
Sure. So it happened at larger companies, more so because it's more noticeable. But when you're in a room and you're asked, what's the headcount number, and you're getting ready for your quarter end, and you invariably have 3 teams give out 3 numbers, right? And they're not wrong. Nobody's intentionally giving a wrong number. Finance is looking at their budgeted headcount. HR is looking at active headcount, and then you have TA that's looking at the open recs, right? So they're all looking at the same problem from different angles, but no one's actually wrong. But I think you have to reframe that question and ask, like, what are you looking for? Like, what is your headcount management process? And then what are you looking for? Are you looking for active headcount? Are you looking for where headcount's going to end? And how do you define that? And, how do you support TA also fill those roles? To your question about what happened is when you have your HRIS and your ATS not talking to your FP&A system, you end up having analysts having to manually input start dates, who's starting, who's terminating, if they're not integrated and connected. It's a very manual process, and very quickly it can add into the hundreds of thousands if you're a smaller company, and into the millions if you're a larger company. So that was the aha moment, is let's integrate, let's give the systems to do the harder part of the job, and then make it much more functional for FP&A to be a thought partner.
Have you seen that? What is the trigger point when companies start feeling this pain? Because we talk to a lot of companies as well, and we are not going in replacing any system. We are not going in. We are always replacing a spreadsheet, and
Correct.
sometimes I think about it. Is like, why has this not been solved? Like, any ideas on like why is this not existential for people?
I think the dollar cost is not glaring at people, but it soon will. With
Mm.
AI, teams are asked to do more with less. And, when you're looking at a headcount, even if you're a smaller company, right? And say you're a 300, 400 person company and you have 10 roles that get pulled forward. Average cost of one headcount's roughly 200,000, right? You do the math. It's
Hmm.
already in the hundreds of thousands if you're missing them by
Right.
months or if you're pulling forward by months. And that becomes a problem very quickly if you're doing that month over month. And I think that when you start looking at it from a different perspective, when your finance team looks at the cost of drift or the cost of slippage, which TeamOhana does beautifully, I have to say. It's really one of the key things that I really enjoy in the tool is looking at how roles drift and what that cost
Hmm.
is, and how do you manage that effectively with TA. So I'd say any size above 200, or depending on your number of open roles, that becomes meaningful for teams to say, yes, we need to make sure that our headcount rhythm is being managed. Otherwise, I'm going to land in a variance of 50, 70,000 plus in a month, and I need to manage that better.
Got it. So we talked about the three teams working in three different systems, not aligning on the number, the cost of the inaction. So now let's get into the solution aspect. Like, what do you feel is a good process? And be as prescriptive as you'd like, because we want folks to be taking notes and like leave them with anecdotes that they can go and implement, in the next hour if they can.
Sure. So I'd say even before thinking about a tool, thinking about how you want to make changes, I'd say look at your current process.
Hmm.
It always starts there, right? How is FP&A looking at it? How are they looking at budgeted roles? How are they looking at it by cost center? How are they thinking about spend by quarter? Typically, headcount, in this example, let me say that headcount would start from an AOP process, so that's finance
Hmm.
led. Now, for
Right.
different scenarios, it would be, different teams originating that headcount. But assume we start with AOP, finance starts that. So document that process first. How does that then get approved? Typically at the smaller companies or somewhere where there's no rhythm or cadence, I shouldn't peg it at a size of a company. Someone's emailing or someone's slacking their manager. I have this role in AOP. Manager approves it or pushes that Slack message to their manager. Then there's an email that gets forwarded. There's an approval, but the role then nothing happens for weeks. And then suddenly that role manifests in a system and then you're trying to hire, right? So first
Mhm.
document what is that process going to look like? If it's Slack, that's fine. TeamOhana, this is another thing that I like is it integrates well with Slack and it has its own approval matrix in the back end, right? So use that if you are on TO. If you're not, then first I'd say document that process. The second part of it is your workforce plan. So you have your financial plan. Now you go into your workforce plan. This is where your roles get loaded. This is where when that person starts, you're going to have that HRIS aspect come in. And the third layer is your recruiting plan, which is your ATS tool. That could be a greenhouse, an Ashby, iCIMS, what have you. But making sure that these three are connected and are in sync is very important. Either you have, if you're working off spreadsheets, you typically would have a rec ID or some sort of an ID that connects between all three systems for you to join back.
Mhm.
If you're on a tool, the tool should already be doing that for you to connect back. The other thing is always understand the budget aspect, right? Sometimes you don't have teams leaning into the budget angle, but be really clear. Are you budgeting at midpoint? Are you budgeting at 75th percentile? Are you budgeting at 90th percentile? So then your TA team knows where there's room to come back if needed to. Um, and I think it becomes really important when you have drift or when you have a pull forward to understand what the financial impact is. So then your leader can make a trade-off and say, hey, this is my P0. So I'm going to push my P3 out by a couple months because I have to incur this cost sooner if I need this person hired sooner. If they find the right candidate or they want to go above offer, they can manage to that. It doesn't become an uncomfortable discussion when you know how much it's going to cost. And I've put one of these reports that I use from TeamOhana
As
in the
part of the
recipes as part of the recipes, just to enable you to have that context. Because when your leader knows what it costs, then the discussion is a lot easier. The trade-offs are a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's you explained it in a very, I think, in a very simple way that, hey, let's start with there is a financial plan that translates into a workforce plan. The workforce plan is now more detailed. Let's assume everything's running in a spreadsheet. But I think the most important piece of the puzzle is that you have some way of defining the budget, which is like, hey, when do you want to get this role in the books and how much do you want to pay, so that at least there is visibility downstream to the recruiting team. It's like, what are they going to
Correct.
work off? I love that you said that the leaders should be making that trade-offs, but um, shameless plug in there is that that's the place where also it's like easy in TeamOhana to do it in the scenario. Uh, but yeah, they should all do this, but I just don't think that everybody can do this easily. There has to be some master spreadsheet that Arti you will have to create, and if you have made one, we will happily send it out to everyone. It's like if I move this cell, you go and calculate the FY impact and get things going there. But it's awesome. All right, get these three systems together, define this cadence or a coordinated flow, which is like define a plan, give it to the recruiting team, and then you also mentioned that there should be some unique ID. The way we've seen this really work well is you take the headcount ID that is the approved ID from the position, make it the opening ID in Greenhouse or Ashby or ISIMS,
Correct.
and then also send that ID back into the HR system when the ATS you have the candidate that accepted the offer. That's so that keeps everything coordinated and actually helps you make
Correct.
sense of things. Let's we were talking about this cadence, right? Is this something a daily cadence, or how should these what's your best practice for these three teams or just two teams, if it's finance or whoever needs to come together to keep the plan reconciled at least once a week, once a month? What's your best
So
practice there?
it depends. We start off with weekly. If your process is a squiggly line, then we start off with a weekly and you have TA, HR, and FP&A get together for 30 minutes. You
Hmm.
reconcile priority roles in that meeting. You reconcile what's coming up. So HRBP will tell you how many backfills there are. If sometimes TA would already know, right? But you reconcile backfills, you reconcile start dates, you reconcile P0s, you reconcile if there are conversations about pull forwards, because sometimes hiring managers, smaller companies mostly, are much more like hiring managers and TA. And then you want to pull in your HRBPs and FP&A, right? So once you start getting into a tool or a rhythm, then you can move it to once every 2 weeks. And then if you have your Team Ohana really well integrated, then I'd say once a month is good.
Sounds good. So it's if you get the benefits of keeping the process tight and keeping you close to the budget, but then you also save the time once you build that cadence and get into that
Correct.
rhythm. Um, you were mentioning how things change and the different maturity models that you have seen, right? Small company, large company. Uh, can you share like what exactly that means for our audience?
Sure. I think the smaller companies would have more spreadsheets and their approval plot process would reside emails, Slack conversations. As you start building, it moves from having those approvals in Slack and email. And then, sometimes you may not know when a hire is made because your spreadsheet's not reconciled with your HRIS. So the person may have started, but he's still sitting as an open role in your spreadsheet. That's generally like a little bit of the chaos at the first tier of the cake, if you think of it.
Hmm.
As you grow, then you have a better process and you're seeing less of those issues towards the tail end where people are starting but still sit in your plan. You don't see as much of that happening. It would be far less. But the approval process still resides on email and Slack, right? And then the really mature process is you have the tools, you have the integration, you have approvals happening in the tool. It's more tool dependent and you don't have a lot of the offline approvals. You really need to move away from offline approvals in that maturity model to then be
Hmm.
able to run robust and analytics against approved versus open roles. How long does it take for time to fill? How much are we going over from our midpoint when we make offers? All
Yeah.
that modeling happens in that really mature process. And it becomes very meaningful because we've done the math, and you can see that when you invest in a tool and you've implemented it well and you have these reporting, everyone's operating tighter. P zeros are not slipping because when a P zero slips, and I say this also for AEs, if your AE hiring plan gets delayed, it's not a cost saving. A lot of people position it as cost saving. I beg to differ. It's a revenue risk because there's an
Yeah.
AE ramp time, your capacity modeling goes out the window, and you really need to make sure your eye is also on your top line. This is not just an OpEx exercise, right? So just want to plug that as
Yeah.
well.
We were talking about like how if this cadence or this process breaks, there is broken, you have this loss of productivity, and that compounds. And who better than you to know that when you were at DocuSign, right? That was the game, right? You gotta get people in seat. So I think it's not just about the cost savings, because I think people usually quickly think about, hey, if I do my headcount planning right, then I'm going to save time and I'm going to save money. But I think it is also the opportunity lost, especially
Correct.
in this day and age when you're really fighting for market share and everybody has all these tools, right? We've got fewer good people out there in the market. Prices are still very high in terms of compensation. So why add one more lost or a broken process to delay your success? That's awesome. So we talked about something, right? Let's say and I hear this a lot, right? Hey Tushar, we get it, we should get TeamOhana going, we'll get it implemented. We should get out of spreadsheets, we can measure the ROI. But now comes the really hard part of change management. We said people, process, and systems. So there's a small group of people who get aligned and build the process, let's say with someone like you helping. And then you've got a system, let's say TeamOhana is helping there, but the X factor is still the rest of the people. In your experience, whether it's at DocuSign or whether it is at this current company that we are collaborating together, which is smaller than DocuSign, I would say, how do you go sell the idea to people that, hey, get out of spreadsheets, don't randomly send Slack messages? How do we implement change management?
It
How
takes,
should we think about it?
yeah, I'd say first, you can't go from 0 to 10. It takes time. It's a process, right? But I can tell you what's worked well. There are three things that I tend to lean on. One is have an executive sponsor. If your CFO or CHRO is not backing that adoption, the chances that you're going to make huge strides drastically come down, right? Like it just drifts.
Right.
But having that executive sponsor is essential. The second part I'd say is that you start from the top. Start from what are your leaders actually asking for. If you can give, no one in an executive meeting wants to sit and reconcile numbers. They want the so what. If they cannot pull their action items from your HCM integration, that conversation, I'd say, is like game over in their mind, or you have
Hmm.
to like try to work your way back. So start with what are your leaders looking for? Is your CFO caring more about budget in that moment? Is your HR looking at how many P zeros do I have to fill, or do I have a recruiter capacity gap? Um, is the business trying to grow too fast and TA saying I can't staff all these roles? Make sure you have those insights and those so what's and action items before you go and present your model to your leaders. And the third thing I'd say is enablement. Moving from spreadsheets to a tool requires a lot of enablement effort. Making sure you have the how to and documented as a process, because if you're asking a recruiter or a people ops to go and do something in your tool, they need to know how to do it. Hold office hours. If you're asking FP&A to go and approve a role with an SLA of 24 hours, they need to know where to find it and how to approve it. So have office
Hmm.
hours, have the enablement, invest in it. It takes 3, 4 months to get good enablement going. Invest in it. So I'd say these are my three lean ons to make sure that it's successful.
You said you said like you named a persona without naming the persona. Like, where do you have you seen this process and change management be successful if it is a finance led effort or an HR led effort? Who- where who should lead this effort, or is this a joint motion?
I
uh,
think it's a joint motion, right? It
okay.
certainly would be a joint motion. I've seen it typically reside either with the CFO backing it or the
Mm.
CHRO backing it. So depending on who your exec sponsor is, that team naturally will tend to lean in more, but it's one of these two teams typically.
And would you say that we get it? If the CFO is backing it, someone in FP&A or FinOps is going to take lead on this, right? And
Correct.
we've actually seen that work really, really well. Uh, if the CHRO is backing it, we actually see TA ops, or the newer I would function called recruiting operations,
Recruiting ops.
really leaning in. Uh,
Yeah.
any pros and cons, whether it's rec ops or whether it is FinOps, on how you have seen this work, or any
I
feedback
think
for
both.
them on how they can do this better?
Yeah, I'd say whoever is leading it has their vision, right? There's always an agenda of how they're looking at it because that's their conditioning, right? So if finance is looking at it, they're going to look at FP&A start dates, they're going to look at the financial metrics behind it. If recruiting's leading it, they care more about department, division, manager, location, just generally things that are between the recruiting plan and the financial plan. But I'd say it's really important to look at it together.
Hmm.
That's what I come in and do is I help join both of those aspects
Yeah.
and make sure that the tool is serving both needs and that we're looking at it both ways. Because if you look past each other, the organization is going to, at the end of the day, still have challenges, right? But if you work together and you row together, then you're going to move faster and it's generally a more collaborative and a better outcome.
Right. We do want to. You mentioned outcome, so we'll start talking about, like, if you get this right, because at the end of the day, we are all selling. We're selling up, right? We're selling an idea. We're selling. If I just walk into the office and tell my boss that, hey, this is going to save me, it's going to make it easier for me, it may or may not fly with the CFO or the CHRO, because they are. This GNA department has always traditionally been capacity constrained. Do more with less, whether there is AI, no AI, whether there is tool, no tool, right? Um, so I want to talk to you about two things, right? And you choose where you want to go first. I want you to explain to us, like, hey, when this starts working, what is the downstream impact, both to the individual, whether it's FinOps or RecOps, and to the business? What does it do for the hiring managers? And then I want to talk to you about this, uh, with AI agents also coming in, like, everybody's spending on tokens. How do you think workforce planning will change? So maybe we take that later, but why don't you tell us the outcome first, right? Like,
Sure. Yeah, let's start there. I'd say today I've seen a lot of time invested in getting the active headcount right. But if you get this process correct and your HRIS is spot on and managed well, you don't have to bat an eye on your active headcount. Can you imagine a month close process where you don't have to go back and reconcile what was my ending headcount number? Like, where did we end the
yeah,
month? And that saves an analyst so much time. When I was at, some of these larger companies, I've spent as a director, senior director, I've spent hours trying to get that ending headcount number right. And if you break that down, it quickly runs into a sizable number in terms of
yeah.
hours, right? So just being mindful of how many hours of time you can save for your analysts, for your leaders, if they're not spending time on active headcount. That should be a very, very simple process getting it from your HRIS tool. Think of a world where you don't have to worry about your transfers going through. Your transfers, you have a rolling roster of who transferred in, who transferred out, where are they going if it's a transfer with a backfill. That also
Hmm.
should come from your HRIS, right? Promotions. You don't have to go manage your promotions and say this person moved from L4 to L5, or, if you have it the other way around, then that way. But it's coming in from your HRIS. So these three are very, very strong, active um, numbers that you can get from your HRIS tool. That's significant cost savings. Then your FP&A person and your HR and your TA is focused really where the rubber meets the road is what are the roles we're trying to fill? what are our P0s, what are our P1s, how many of those can we actually staff them in the time that we're asking for? Do we have the right capacity? Do we have the right recruiters in the right locations? You're answering more thoughtful questions rather
Mm,
than trying to play the numbers game. And I think that makes a significant shift. You can work on revenue modeling, you have more time to work on, your top line, you have more time to work on metrics that matter like CAC, LTV, and you don't have to worry so much about headcount.
yeah, that's that's the world we are all hoping to get to. I know we are almost at time. So let me just recap. So, as part of this process, um, we will, of course, have for everybody who is on the call today, we will summarize all the key points and key processes. We didn't get to go through some of the details that Arti and I had discussed in our prep. We will include all of that for everybody who attended and also have those assets on our website. Arti, maybe think about this, right? It's like we are all, the amount of money that we are spending on human labor, we are also now spending on tokens, which let's just coin it as agent labor of some sort. How do you think about this changing the workforce planning process? Uh, will it change it, or
It
what
it
where
would
do you
change it.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
I
how
like
would you
to
change it?
How would it change it? I would like to think of it as more the transactional layer of it would start to
Hmm.
change. How you interact with headcount would start to change. So some
Okay.
aspects will evolve over time, but by and large, the system can help a lot with this integration part of it, making sure that it runs smoothly.
Hmm.
But you still need the human aspect to create that structure, make sure that it's catching edge cases, and making sure that you're getting the right talent and you're not getting someone who's looked at all of these different tools, cracked the interview, but actually can't, is not reliable to do what they're saying they can do, right? So I think that still relies on good TA, good interview processes, because you can quickly run into a challenge over there. From the headcount management process, it will evolve. I think you're already using so much of the analytics that you're able
Hmm.
to deliver. I love the product for that reason. I can ask it, it'll give me the insights. I think it's already fundamentally changing how we interact and how we behave, and I think that's a huge leap. But asking the right questions still
Yeah.
is where, how do you ask the right prompt is still where the talent is required to do that.
Great. That's a very positive looking way to, come bring this conversation to the close. Arti, thank you so much. Um, how should people reach you? What's the best way for people to, after this webinar, get a chance to talk to you or even bring you in their company? Because I know you are you're the torchbearer of good workforce planning best practices in this world now. So how do people
Thank
reach you?
you. LinkedIn would be the best way, and we can send that out after the webinar. But LinkedIn would be the easiest way to reach out to me. But thank you for having me. I think I hadn't worked with TeamOhana before. This was my first time working with the tool, and I have to say that very, very impressive. Thank you, Tushar, for making a lot of things simpler, lightweight, and a lot easier to manage. And what you're doing with Timo is phenomenal. Recipes,
Yeah.
Timo, really,
A
really
lot,
pleased with.
a lot of, but thank you for the kind words. It's all my team. They just keep me for the paperwork, or maybe they tell me I look pretty on calls, but I don't know about that. But thank you so much. And thanks everybody for joining. Arti, have a good rest of your day. And thanks
Thank
everyone.
you.